Welcome to another episode of Stoke Meter, and we have the pleasure of having David Mendoca on our show. I'm glad that you told us how to say that last name because I would have slaughtered it, David.
Yeah, it's a Basque name. It means from cold mountain. It's Mendoza. So
okay, I love it. Well, and one thing that I failed to mention is David is also the podcast king of a show called The Show Up Dad. And it is something that is pretty inspirational, being a father myself and looking at what you've been doing. I'm just wanting to just delve right into this, man. How did this all come about?
Well, it started off, believe it or not, in 2018. I'm a journeyman lineman by trade. So I used to travel a lot. I've been doing that for now 16 years. Okay. But in 2018, I was working out of state. I had been doing so for 3 years. I was working in Texas, and it was during the Christmas time. And we would go home at December 18th on to just January 7th, right? I would take a Christmas break because I'd made enough money to take off like that. Anyhow, long story short, I came home on break and we went to Christmas Eve at my sister's house with my family. And my wife, who I've been married to for 17 years this year, she got really sick. Okay. She couldn't feel her legs. I mean, she was extremely cold. She couldn't feel her legs. She had lost all feeling in her legs and stuff like that. And my mom brought it to my attention. She's like, hey, something's wrong with your wife. You need to take her to the emergency room. At that point in time, our marriage is kind of on the rocks because she had been, for the last couple of months, she'd been really, really upset with me and wanting me to come home. She was basically begging for me to come home, that she couldn't do it anymore. Okay. Right. Now, keep in mind at this point in time, she had 3 children. She had 300 chickens, 5 dogs, 3 cats, and a small farm that she was taking care of me while I was out on the road providing for my family, to keep a roof over her head, to keep the bills paid, yada, yada. Everything that we do as fathers, right? As blue-collar dads, hardworking dads, right? So I didn't want to hear it anymore. I was already like over it. I was like, oh man, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to hear it. Right. So I was kind of checked out at that time with our connection. And my mom had to point it out that she was, sick. So we took her to the emergency room. They told us to basically go home. They couldn't find nothing wrong with her, enjoy our family, and come back if anything's wrong. Because, it was a nursing staff, and they're like, we don't really want to deal with this. It's Christmas Eve. So we go home. Her symptoms started to continue, and Christmas Day came about. She woke up. She was excited about Christmas. That's one of her favorite holidays. And she started cooking Christmas dinner and stuff like that. We opened up our gifts, and she wasn't feeling really good. And I remember her saying, hey, I'm going to go. Can you watch the kids? I'm going to go to the back. I'm going to rest. And I was like, yeah, go do whatever you got to do. So I'm playing with the kids and stuff, just trying to make up for that lost time of me being out of state. Right. And she comes frantic from the back, and I'm like, is everything okay? And she's like, has these, her eyes are just huge, right? Like real frantic looking. And she's like, man, she's like, something's wrong. I got to go. I'm like, what do you mean something's wrong? Where are you going to go? She's like, I got to go to the emergency room. I was like, well, what do you want me to do? I just bathed our children. They're in their jammies. She's like, no, don't take them. Stay here. They told me that H1N1 is a virus. It's affecting little kids and the elderly. Just stay here. I'll be okay. She tells me. I was like, okay. So she goes to the emergency room. I don't hear from her until about 3:00 in the morning. And at this point in time, I got the kids in my bed. I'm calling her. She's not answering her phone. I'm like, what the heck? I'm trying to call her mom. Her mom's trying to get a hold of her too. And we live in the country, so we're kind of far.
Right.
And I remember getting the call like 2:33 in the morning, and it was the charge nurse. And she's like, hey, I just want to let you know your wife's heart stopped. We're having to intubate her. We're trying to bring her
Oh,
back. I'll keep you posted. Bye. And I'm like,
oh
what do
man.
you mean? You know what I mean? So I got, you can't even imagine all the thoughts I'm having at this point in time. I'm thinking about, how am I going to go back to work? How am I going to provide? How am I going to take care of these children? Am I going to have to sell everything? Am I going to have to take my kids and move closer to my parents, which lived in the mountains, probably about 4 hours away? I'm thinking about all these different things, all these different scenarios running in my head. And what really struck me is I started looking back and doing some self-reflection. And when I'm thinking about that, how selfish was I? Because I'm thinking about me, what am I going to do, instead of thinking about my wife, right? And that's the place where, that's where God started doing his work in me, because that's the place I had gone to, where it was all about me, and that's very selfish, to think that way. And from that point on, I started doing this internal work. I started seeing where I had been failing. At that point in time, I couldn't go back to work because we couldn't figure out what's going on with my wife. I got fired. One of the guys I worked with, he was like, sorry, Dave, I need you out here. If you can't work, I don't need you. He's like, I'll replace you.
Man.
Right. So I told him, you got to do what you got to do, Rodney. And at that point in time, Rodney did what he needed to do. He's a GF. He needed to make it an executive decision, and I don't hold it against him,
Right.
So I got fired. I'm at the house. I'm with these kids. I'm with my wife, who, for lack of better words, can't even get out of bed. We still don't even know what's going on with her at this point. Wow. The doctors don't know. They're taking test after test after test, and we can't figure it out. I'm starting to think to myself, man, is she just making this stuff up because she wants me home? And I remember her praying one day in the bed, and she started getting like really frantic, right? And she called me in the bedroom, and she's like, if anything happens to the kids, please tell me right now. Promise me you're going to protect them. You're going to keep them safe. And I'm like, what do you mean? Is if anything happens to you, nothing's going to happen to you, And she's like, no, please promise. So I promised her that I'd take care of the kids and stuff like that. And in my own head, I'm like kind of freaking out, but I'm trying to keep it together, right? Because that's what men do.
Yeah.
And she's telling me all this stuff, and I walk out of the bedroom, and I'm like thinking about what she had said, and I hear her praying to God, and she's asking God to take her. She's asking God. She's like, God, please take me. I can't deal with this pain anymore, because she was in excruciating pain. And oh man, that really broke my heart. And just so happened that when she was doing these prayers and stuff like that, she got this thought that came to her head, and she said that something specifically, for me to take from her story and air it out there. I mean, it's her story per se, you know what I mean? But the way I got from her, what she told me, is that she heard this inaudible voice. It was just like a thought that came to her head, and it told her Lyme. Well, when we went to the doctors again to figure out what was going on with her, the doctors are like, we're going to have to send you to the Mayo Clinic. We can't figure it out. And she's like, well, can you test me for Lyme? And the doctor's like, hey, I don't see why not. We've tested you for everything, but what's it going to hurt? So they tested her for Lyme, and immediately she tested off the charts for it.
Oh man.
We got a call the following week from the CDC, not even the doctor's office. This was the CDC, right?
Right.
Center of Disease Control. And they called us, and they're like, hey, how did you get this? Have you been out of the country? Have you been to the Northeast? Are you guys importing deer? That's one of the questions he asked us. Yeah. So we're like, no, and no. And what the heck is Lyme disease? Because we lived in the Southwest, Now we had 15 acres of alfalfa fields behind us, real beautiful. And that year it was really hot. And I remember she was complaining that there was a lot of ticks. Now she had been running. Yeah. She was in perfect shape. She had been getting ready for a marathon, all this stuff, because my wife was a runner. She loved to run. And I don't know if she got it on the ditch or she got bit in the yard or whatever, but I just know that she was complaining that there was a lot of ticks and our dogs are getting ticks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Center of Disease Control tried to tell us that there is no Lyme disease there. She doesn't know how my wife got it, but this is the protocol and this is what you need to do, right? My wife kind of panicked because she started looking into like Lyme disease and stuff and saw how bad it could possibly get if you don't catch it on time.
Right.
So my wife went with the most aggressive protocol, which was an extensive amount of antibiotics, right? I mean, she was taking about anywhere from 14 to 16 pills a day of antibiotics, different kinds of antibiotics. Well, you know how bad antibiotics are. So it completely destroyed her gut flora. Her body went into a fight or flight with her limbic system. So her body started recognizing all foods as bad and she became allergic to everything. So she started, not only was she dealing with the Lyme, she was extremely allergic to food. So she couldn't even keep anything down. She lost body mass. She was skin and bones. I remember I would have to help her get in and out of the tub sometimes because she was just skin and bones. And it was just a rough time. But that whole entire time, the point I'm getting at is the whole entire time I was home, I started realizing how bad of a father I was. My kids were afraid of me. They were walking on eggshells. And what I mean by that is I set the tone in the household. I set that level. And as a father, that's what we do. We have that much influence in our homes. And we need to realize it, guys, for those who are listening. That's how much influence we have in our homes. I set the tone to where it was chaotic, to where when I came in, they were afraid. They didn't know what version daddy they're going to get that day. They didn't know if daddy was going to go into work mode, as my wife called it, or if daddy was going to be loving and caring or what. So that left them with these highs and lows that they're always constantly, is daddy going to be good to us? Is daddy going to yell at us? What's going to happen? You know what I mean? And this is very, very chaotic. And I started seeing that I was creating this in my children. The baby, not so much because we just had him, but my middle child and my daughter, especially my teenage daughter, she wasn't a teenager at the time, but there's a lot of stuff that I had to work on with her to gain that relationship back with her because of my actions, because of my criticalness. I was very, very critical with her. A lot of times fathers, we tend to see the worst of ourselves in our children, and we don't like that, and we recognize that, so we get mad at them, and all it is reflection of us. One of the biggest things I've learned is that marriage and children are the biggest causes for growth in a human being. And that's what started this whole journey. It started off with children and being a better father, being a more engaged father, being a more committed, responsible father. And then it kind of morphed from there, because at the end of the day, we're teaching our kids how they're going to last in life, how they're going to progress in life. Are they going to be a better contributor to society? Are they going to be a better husband to their wife? I mean, they watch us. Everything we do, they are watching us and how we respond.
Man, I feel humbled. I feel like, dude, I got some improvements, man. Because when it goes back to the thing, hey, it's all about me, it's easy to fall into that trap, because you look at, we're the breadwinner, or even if we're not the breadwinner, there's something that is always speaking that I need to do this, and this. And so it's easy to come up with that mentality. And to see you dissect that and make it so relatable, that's when I say it was humbling. That's what was humbling to me, man.
And it's a lot of self-awareness, really, because I mean, everything nowadays that you see is what people are pushing. A lot of people are pushing nowadays. It's all on you. It's all on you, self-improvement, all this stuff. And I get that. That's a good thing, because you should be self-aware, right?
Yeah.
That way you can give the best version of yourself to those you love. I agree with that 100%.
Mhm.
But at the same token, it's not just to improve you, it's to improve the better quality for your children. It's not our goal to make our children happy, but it's our goal to make our children, to provide a place where they can experience that happiness.
Mm.
Right. And
Yeah.
And I think that stability too that you talked about is so key, or that consistency. I've often thought many times it's almost better to have a dad that's consistently a jerk than someone that's all over the map. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least they know what to count on. I think that there had to have been a really big difference between, or a process from when you realized that you had an issue with the relationship with your kids, to then bridging that gap and actually doing something about it. How did you make that leap? Because I think there's a lot of dads that probably are like, I'm just not that great of a dad, but they don't really do anything about it. What happened, or what was it with you that took you to that next step where you're like, okay, it's on, I'm going to do something about this?
I think it was the way they had related to me and the way the response. I like to watch people, and the response I was getting from them was not good. Okay. So that sparked an interest in me to see, well, why are they responding to me that way? Have you ever seen a dog, or, and I hate to liken my kids to a puppy or whatever, but have you ever seen a dog that's been hit? And you move your hand and all of a sudden they're like that. Well, that's kind of basically the response they were getting. Not that I abuse my children or anything like that, but that's the response I was getting from them. When you work out of town as a father and a provider, a lot of times you have this this notion in your head that you're going to come home, they've missed you, all this different stuff. Our trade, the trade I'm in, is one of the most dangerous trades in the world. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So every day we're putting our life on the line, literally. I mean, we're inches away from stuff that can maim you, kill you, paralyze you, whatever, burn you up. Okay. A fault, they say, is 7 times hotter than the sun. Wow. That's the fire we deal with if we do something bad. And that's on a good day. 7 times hotter than the surface of the sun. So that could evaporate you. Okay. And we're dealing with this and laughing about this every day. So when we get home from being on the road or being tired or whatever, we're expecting, hey man, here's my hero. My dad's home. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's great. If you're doing something right, if that's the response you're getting, is what I'm getting at. Right. I wasn't getting that response. And all of a sudden I had these, I was expecting that. And when I wasn't expecting that, that started leading me down to being upset with my children. I'm like, well, why aren't they celebrating me? Mm-hmm. They're just tolerating me. They're actually looking forward to when daddy goes on the road again. Yeah. That's what they were doing. And it as a dad, it doesn't make you feel good, especially when they're just consistently just like, is daddy going to go home? And when does daddy leave again? And instead of, daddy, don't go. Daddy, don't go.
So what was step one for you once you realized that? How do you approach something like that? Because there's some deep-rooted problems there when your kids are ready for you to exit the door.
Yeah. Well, the first step I had was just that self-realization and seeing that was happening. Okay. Once I realized that was happening, once you identify a problem, you automatically, your brain starts going into fixing it. Okay. Yes. Systematically. Okay. It automatically goes to that point. So I started reading books. I started just asking other fathers. One of the things I did is I had this great book by a guy named Steve Farrar that I had picked up about 13 years ago. Okay. And this is back when they had Hastings bookstores. Okay. So that should give you a time frame how long ago it was. This book was bright red and it was called Point Man. Now, recently, Steve Farrar, he passed away. He was a great man. And, my condolences to him, and rest in peace and stuff like that. But his book was so amazing and it had such a big impact on my life that it would cause me to pick it up, read it, and I could only handle bits and pieces of it because it made me feel so convicted. Then I'd put it down. So I had forgot that I had this book, and I started realizing it came to my brain for whatever reason that, hey man, I can fall back to this resource. So I started reading. I like to read a lot. Okay. So I started reading this book. I started seeing the things I was doing, and it was in perfect alignment with what he was talking about. And I started saying, man,
Yeah.
I need to make a difference. I need to make a change in my life because I'm going down the wrong route. Because in that book, it talks about different routes, like when we push our kids a certain way, we could either push them to be defeminized or feminized, right? Especially with our males, and he goes through all these different things that we do as men, and unknowing to us, right? And I started seeing that. I started putting that into perspective. I started seeing that it was working in my children's lives. Little corrections, right? Because when you start taking it on as a whole, I think for men, we get overwhelmed, right? So I started looking at it in a perspective that I learned when I was in the line trade. When we'd go to these big storms and you'd see all these poles broken down and stuff like that, it's really easy to get overwhelmed because you're like, man, we're never going to finish. This is a damn mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had one foreman the guy who fired me, who I have the utmost respect for. He tells me, Davey, because he'd call me Davey. He's like, Davey, he's like, just work one structure at a time. That's it. Don't worry about the rest of it. Just be where your feet are and work one structure at a time. And we'll just go from there. And it goes back to the old saying, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time.
Yep.
So that's what I started doing. I had to realize the problem. I had to assess the problem. I had to attack the problem. And that's what I did. And that's worked for me. That's what I preach to all the men I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I want to tell men today, for those who are listening, a bad moment necessarily doesn't mean a bad life. You're going to make those mistakes.
Yep.
No one's perfect. We didn't have a blueprint when we became a father. We didn't have a blueprint when we became a husband. Okay.
Right.
We're going to make mistakes. The biggest thing we can do is own up to those mistakes, make the corrections, and go forward and try not to do that same mistake again.
Right. Right. There's a lot of a correlation to a lot of businesses that I've had the opportunity to speak with as of late. And it's funny because this is transferable too. Now that it's not just the fathers in the workplace, there's a lot of moms in the workplace too. And I often wonder how many times all of this, there's a great teaching experience on both sides, whether a mom or a dad. And especially for the individuals that I've been speaking with as of late, it's easy to get sucked into that. And so that realization is a powerful realization. I know it nails me because it makes me reflect upon the type of father I've been. And then looking over my wife and seeing the amazing mom she's been. And it's funny because we have the same concerns and worries. And it's amazing what it does when we start to speak with each other and share those experiences. I'm assuming that's probably something that happened as your wife started to make a recovery, is that as you made all these realizations yourself, how was it when you started to share those with your wife? And then what was the impact upon your relationship, but with not only your wife, but also with your children?
Well, I think with their wives, for my wife, there's lip service and there's action. Okay. So anybody can say they're making the changes.
Right.
For my wife, she needed to see the changes. So once I started speaking it out and then I started acting it out and it was consistent, like he had talked about, that consistency, then she started seeing, okay, he's legit. Because for the longest time, I'd always tell my wife, this year, I'll come home next year. Okay, I'm making money, I'll come home next year. And then next year turned into 15 years, not to act like I was on the road for a very, very long time. I did work at the utility for 3 years. I had on and off, I had worked at home, you know what I mean? But for the most part, all my work was out of town, out of state, even when I was home though, that's the thing that fathers got to understand. When you're home doesn't necessarily mean that you're even present, right?
Yeah.
Because you got these fathers today these fathers today that they are home and they are on a device, they're checked out, you know, and they say the curse of fatherhood is distance. And that distance doesn't necessarily mean distance like how I was. You could be distant in the other room, you know, and I learned that from my father, you know, just looking back and just reflecting. I saw that with my own dad. Yes. And him staying upstairs and dealing with his own personal demons and stuff like that. So to get back what you're asking, my wife had to see me make the changes and be consistent in my changes. And then even with my daughter, like I said, and my sons, my son went from, is daddy going away, to, mom, I don't want daddy going away. Right?
That's awesome.
And for about 6 months, I kid you not, my kid, anytime I went to the gym, anytime I went to anywhere, my kid was wondering when I was going to come back. And that never happened before. Okay. This is how important our role is. And I just want to point this out. My kid had my middle kid, my child, Lucas, he had a speech impediment. One of the past guests we talked about said how a father, one of the important roles of a father, and just him being there, was the child's development of his speech. So now that I was at home, he started speaking better and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And his speech started developing a lot better. He started having more confidence as a young little boy because he's starting to see a masculine man in his presence. You know, so it's so important. Our roles are so important.
Man, that was a pretty powerful statement. The curse of fatherhood is distance. I mean, there's multiple pictures. I guarantee it. I'm probably looking at my device. And that was just a slap in the face. The importance of being present. Wow. I can't.
Yeah, I've always said that the biggest part of being a parent is just showing up. And I think that kind of ties into what you're saying is a lot of times you don't really even, you said before that there's no manual for parenthood. There's no manual, you know, for how to be a dad or marriage or anything else. But man, a big part of it is just showing up for the job. You know what I mean? I know there's been points in my life where I may have, like you said, physically been just, you know, close, but I wasn't there. Not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It is that presence. The presence is it's so easy to say, but to your point, the consistency of word and then seeing the action. Wowzy. I can't tell you how many I'm doing an assessment right now, how many times I've said I would and I didn't.
Well, it's so easy to fall in, Maurice. I mean, seriously, I mean, you go to a restaurant nowadays, you see the father, the mother, the children, all on devices, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we have all this social media and all these different things, right, that are going on. Okay. Everybody's disconnected and sprawled out. I had a past guest on my podcast, and Brady Hansen, and he talked about how what he sees that's driving a lot of depression is this disconnection. Because men are relational, right? And I heard that even on a podcast with Joe Rogan, where he talked about one of the worst things we could do to society to punish a man is to put him into solitary confinement, because people are relational. We need connection. So involuntarily, we're being disconnected by being on social media. Yeah. Because now we're not having relationships anymore. We're not talking at that dinner table talk anymore. Yeah. Right. It went from being at a show up to where everybody's talking about what the day's going on over a cup of coffee, waiting for the sun to come up so they can climb a pole and get to work, to sitting in the truck on a device.
It's so true. Matter of fact, did you see, you know, Barbie the welder, right? Barbie the welder. Yeah. She had a post this morning. It was so funny. She goes, in my day, and it was high tech to have, it's that pen with 4 colors, you know, those big pens are, and when I was 8 years old, this was high tech. And he goes, my 8-year-old's asking for this. And it's so funny because when you look at that, yes, it's a powerful device, but man, that pen made it so that you could share pictures with your buddy and not just texting it. I mean, literally they could draw on it. Right?
Yep.
But What a great point. And what are some of the things that you have shared with fathers, or not shared, but rather changes that you have seen in other fathers as you've been able to share some of the things that you have learned?
I've seen a lot more intentionality with fathers. And what I mean by that is I've seen a lot more people, like, especially on Instagram. I'm really big on Instagram. And I've had a lot of fathers just sending me pictures of their families, showing that they're engaged. Just simple things in life, you know what I mean? Just being intentional, being where their feet are with their children. You know, I've had a lot of fathers start asking me the hard questions, you know, like, hey man, I'm not getting along with my spouse at the moment. And, you know, and just asking those questions, and they're becoming self-aware. You know, they didn't even know they had a problem, because let's face it, you don't know you have a problem until you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
That the old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Yeah.
doesn't fly, you know. And one of the things I've learned is that with our spouses, right, as men,
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of times we think they're bickering, you know, that they're bickering, they're complaining, and we blow it off, we blow it off, we blow it off. What we need to realize is that's a cry for help. They're on their last leg. Okay. And when a lot of times husbands, we think when they stop complaining that we're in a safe spot, that, okay, I must have solved the problem. They're not complaining anymore. Good. Life is good. Marriage is good, right? What they don't understand is that's one of the most dangerous positions you can be, because that means they have given up on you. They have lost all hope for change.
Wow. That's pretty heavy.
It's the truth, though. This is stuff that men need to hear. This is stuff that men need to understand, because I had an old lineman tell me a long time ago when I was an apprentice. He told me, man, love your wife, Dave, because if you don't, someone will. And that is the honest truth.
Man.
You know what I mean? We take them for granted for so much. They do so much for us.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of times we take them for granted. I don't know what it is where you think you went through all the motions to court this lady or whatever, or spouse, to get a spouse, right? And then all of a sudden we get married and we forget that we need to continue to do that.
Yeah.
I had a good mentor friend of mine tell me that how you got a thing is how you keep a thing. And that holds true. You know what I mean? You can't just forget, just because I got the prize, now I'm going to move on. You know what I mean? Now I could totally just let myself go and whatever, you know what I'm saying? No, you know, we have an obligation. We have a role to fill. You know, we are the influences in our home. You know, there's a lot of influencers right now.
Right.
And there's a lot of white noise that are out there, right?
Sure.
A lot of different things that are going on. Okay. Well, we need to be able to filter out the good from the bad.
Man.
Right.
Well, one thing I think is interesting too, and I've seen this in my relationship, you know, in the past, and I'm sure it'll happen again, but we also kind of get into this mode where we I don't know how, it's almost like a tunnel vision on how we view our partner or other people. And without intention, that is so hard to break, you know what I mean? And just being the humans we are, that tunnel vision tends to kind of be negative over time. We see the faults, we become critical, you know. And there's been points in my life where I just like, you know what, with this person, whether it's a spouse or a child or whatever, I'm just going to think about something good about them today. You know what I mean? And that's been super powerful in my life. Is it helps break that kind of cycle. I don't know if you can relate to that.
No, absolutely. You are what you think on. And if you're just, like you said, just consistently picking out the negatives. And the reason why we do that and we look at the negatives is because we see that in ourselves. So we recognize it. We don't like it. And they are a reflection. Our spouse is a reflection, you know, in a perfect marriage, right? The way it was designed, the way it was supposed to be. Men and women were supposed to be these magnifying glasses for each other. Okay. We're supposed to point out the flaws so you can work on it, because it's going to help you grow as a couple. And it was meant for you to grow together strong, not grow apart. Okay. A lot of times couples, right, feel this tension. Okay. Well, when you look up the meaning of tension, it's two opposing forces going in opposite directions. And a lot of time marriages feel that way, right? But if you think of it, tension is also what builds bridges. So if we don't look at the negative, we look at the positive and see that that's helping us grow. And if we start realizing that their weakness, when we're pointing it out, it's because we have that strength. They need what we have, and we need what they have. And we need to supposed to work. We're supposed to work together as a team to build each other up.
I'm just laughing because I feel like I'm learning from Yoda. This is when you were talking about tension. We in a relationship, it is something that the way that you impose it. As soon as I said, "Yeah, man, that's just bad stuff," but when you're saying it's the same thing that builds a bridge, good night. What a shift in focus and emphasis! Wow, I can't thank you enough for that nugget of wisdom.
Well, and I can tell you, everyone in this discussion, including myself, like we all married up. I'll tell you that right now. I know Maurice's wife. I can tell by your discussion. And so it's kind of ironic sometimes that, you know, we become so critical.
It's crazy. I mean, we start pointing out their flaws and it's like, why do we need to do that? You know what I mean? And what it is, it's a weakness. It's a weakness that we see. And instead of helping them, we got to point it out. It's like that. It's like having a little wound where we just keep picking it and picking it and picking it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh. So what are things that have worked for, let's look at our kind of that spouse relationship. What are some of the things that have been successful for you, David, that have given you the most traction in that area?
Intimacy. Intimacy is the number one thing I think spouses are lacking right now. When you look at the word intimacy, I like to dissect things. Well, what does intimacy say? To me, it means into me see. You got to be completely transparent with them. You know, if you see that they have an insecurity with something, be open about it. You know, we don't read minds. So let me give you an example. If my wife is feeling insecure about something, right? Don't put her in a position to where she's going to have to continue to feel like that. You know what I mean? But at the same token, she needs to tell me, she needs to be able to communicate, because communication is key. She needs to say, hey, man, I'm not feeling good about this. You know, when you do this, this causes anxiety. And then I could explain to her, okay, well, here's my phone here, check this out or whatever. Because I dealt with porn, you know what I mean? On the road and through the military and stuff like that, I dealt with pornography, you know what I mean? And I know as a man, that's something that's very, very, you know, we're visual. So those things are pinpointed for men out there. You know what I mean? So when you fall into a habit of watching that stuff, it's completely degrading the women. It's breaking down your relationship with your spouse. And we can go into a whole different aspect on pornography, right? But anyhow, back to what we're saying, intimacy. And that's really helped me. Another thing too, that's helped our relationship with my wife is being able to empathize. Okay. Showing empathy. I grew up in a household where not a lot of empathy was shown. It was very, very stringent, very militant, very cold-hearted. Okay. And that's how they were raised. So I'm not bagging on my parents at all. Okay. But growing up like that, I brought that into my family, and I wasn't having any empathy, especially towards my wife when she got sick, which when you don't have empathy for your spouse, that builds resentment in them. Okay. It got so bad that my wife literally thought I hated her.
Oh, man.
Okay. And I didn't know that until we started communicating and we started working on our problems and stuff like that. And I'm not saying our marriage is perfect. It wasn't. We've gone through probably a lot of stuff that no marriage should go through. So I'm speaking from experience. Okay. Right. So when I'm telling you it can be worked on, and it takes that self-awareness and being able to put in the work and being able to hear the hard answers, because a lot of times we don't want to hear, you know what I mean? We don't want to hear the truth, that you're doing something wrong or what you've caused. And having that empathy, put yourself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When you put yourself in their shoes and see where they're coming from, that has helped me tremendously. And that takes work, let me tell you, especially from someone who didn't grow up with a lot of empathy.
Well, especially when I'm in fix-it mode all the time. One of the things that my wife keeps on saying is, you want to go automatically into fix mode. You don't even listen. And she's right. I don't know all of the different things that she's dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And that portion of empathy is what I lack at times. I appreciate that.
And I think sometimes there's also stability in misery.
Yeah.
What I mean by that too is like, so sometimes it's just easier to be miserable and not deal with any of the problems or the issues. And that's why this discussion is so intriguing to me, because you could have easily gone down that pathway. Like, my life sucks, this is horrible, this is the way it is, but I'm comfortable. I'm making a good living. You know what I mean? I'm doing all the above, but yet I have so much respect for people that can break out of that. And like you said, actually do the hard work, because it is hard work. And there's going to be distrust along the way, because people aren't going to, I'm sure your wife for the first part looked at you like, yeah, whatever. I don't trust anything you're doing,
Absolutely.
Like, it takes a long time to reestablish those bonds, you know what I mean? And
well, like they say, trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. So you got to be consistent. If you say you're going somewhere, be somewhere. I mean, isn't that what we're teaching our children?
Yeah.
So we need to act that out in our own marriage. I mean, because they're watching us. They're watching how we respond. They're watching how we communicate. They're watching how we argue.
That's true. It really is.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first times that I did something with my thumb and I cussed. And then the next time my son was doing something and he was like 3 years old, and he came by his mom and he said that. Said the same word. I'm in so much trouble, man, for the love. They are watching. And it's amazing how much that they can recall and remember.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the things, talking about the cussing part, I cussed a lot. I grew up in a household that we cussed. That's how we expressed ourselves, right? And there's a lot of cuss words that I don't feel are bad,
Right. Sure.
So, but my wife, she's like, well, they can't be saying that in public because they're going to think, whatever. So what I've done is, with my boys, I started showing them that, hey, you don't talk a certain way in front of a lady that way. So my wife and my daughter, we will not speak like that. When you're with the boys, you're with other linemen, and when you're with my friends, we can talk. And I mean, age appropriate. I'm not dropping F-bombs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But, if you want to say shit, or, you know what I mean? Like, oh, crap, that hurt, or whatever, you know what I mean? I don't have a problem with that. That's me, though, being a man. Okay. And whatever, I don't, that's how we speak. You know what I mean? I've heard a lot more cuss words on the right way than that, So I don't have a problem with it, but around women, I let them know. And I also mimic it, that we cannot speak like that in front of our wives or women. You know what I mean? Because they're learning that. They're learning how to respect women in my household. That's what they're going to be. That's what they're going to be shown. Okay. Gotcha. Another thing too, what I realized I wanted to share with you guys is the same issues I had with my wife are the same issues I have with my daughter.
Makes sense.
I mean, 100%. You don't listen. I don't know how many times I've gone that for my daughter, and it's like, wow, where is she getting this? But and then I started putting two to two together, and I'm like, wow, how can two people be wrong? You know what I mean?
You just diagnosed the problem I had the other night in talking about college with my oldest daughter. Yeah, it is the same thing. Wowzy. Oh my goodness. I can't believe how enlightening educationally this has been for me. And that's being selfish. Garrett, I'm looking at your smile and I'm thinking,
oh no, I hope that we can do this again, because I really want to delve deeper into some of the other stuff that you're doing. I was looking through your website and stuff like that. This has been awesome. And I don't know, it reminds me of the quote on Parenthood by Keanu Reeves. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
No, what do you say?
I gotta say that it's just funny. So he's kind of in the movie. He's kind of the kid that nobody wants to see his kid bring home.
Mhm.
But he kind of has a moment with the dad, and I'll since there are ladies on the conversation, I'm gonna take out some of the words. But he goes, Buckman, you need a license to buy a dog or drive a car. Hell, you need a license to catch a fish. But they'll let any a-hole be a father. And I remember when I heard that, man, that just really kind of well, throughout this whole discussion, that quote kind of just kept rising to the surface. It really is true. The bar has been set pretty low for being a father. But I also think that's an opportunity to just blow away the expectations. And I thank you for giving us some of your perspectives on how we can do that. Really powerful stuff.
It is, and especially for being that vulnerable. I've used that word a number of times, but the more that I see, the best learning I have is when an individual's willing to be that vulnerable. And you've shared some amazing experiences that any person can really relate to. And I do thank you for that. And I do also hope that we can do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, and I appreciate it. I mean, this is a lot of fun to be able to share what we're doing at the foundation. Who knows? You might be seeing a book coming up. So
we're all over that, man.
For sure.
Well, thanks again for your time. Truly appreciated.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on, guys.